Hi there, this is Terry, and welcome to another episode of the Animation Industry Podcast. Today I'm chatting with animation director and studio co-owner Mike Owens about his pursuit and success of creating his own show about an egg, and how it ended up winning an Emmy. But going back, Mike is going to chat about how Columbia College Chicago opened his eyes to the world of animation and how he ended up becoming lead animator for Animaniacs, Pinky and the Brain, and Hysteria pretty much right out of college. Then he's going to chat about how it took 6 years of sticking with his show idea to get it on Amazon Prime, and what it was like working with hundreds of people from all over the world to get it made, and finally his path to starting his own studio so he could pretty much just work from home on his own time. Now, without further ado, let's jump right into the chat. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Mike. How are you doing over there in Minnesota?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on, Terry. Watching it snow periodically.
Oh, no way. It's also periodically snowing here, so we must be in the same snowdrift. Look at that. Yeah, so thanks for coming on the podcast. I do want to talk all about your experience in animation and directing, but I always start this chat off the same way. And where did you catch the bug to get into the industry?
Good question. For me, it was Tom and Jerry. A combination, like the things I just watched that I was drawn to, Tom and Jerry, Droopy, the Flintstones, Bugs Bunny,
and then stuff.
Yeah, just like, everything came on while I was waiting for for school to start in the morning. I'd get up super early with my blanket, watch my cartoons. And there's just something about the how stuck in, like, how is this happening? How do they make these things? Got into my head at some point once I got out of the this is just fun to watch thing. Like, why am I laughing at drawings? And there was one animation book in my public library in my hometown on animation. And then I started putting that's the only resource I could ever find on it. Like, it was, of course, pre-internet and all that stuff. Yeah.
So you didn't have very much exposure to the animation craft as it was. What made you, as you were, I guess, transitioning from child to adult and exploring, career opportunities, with minimal, I guess, influences and resources, what made you say, I'm going to become an animator and do that as my career?
Yeah, I said that earlier than I should have, like, having no resources and having no, living in a place where there's no way that would be a career, over in small town in Pennsylvania. But the more I learned the more I got fascinated with the craft of it from, at that time, like, even by the time I was in high school, that's when Disney was at its peak, doing, when they were doing Aladdin and Little Mermaid and all that kind of stuff. And so all these, like, behind the scenes books started coming out, like those making of books were starting to become a thing. I discovered the Illusion of Life book at that point, of course, and like the How to Draw Cartoons, little flat cheap book you can get in an art store. It sort of ended up becoming an identity for me. It was like, Mike's the guy who's totally into cartoons. So it was like, I guess I'll own that and lean into that. But there was pure fascination. I mean, I grew up in a fairly creative family. My sister's a painter, other sister's a dancer. My mom is a nurse, but also pretty artistic, did like a lot of crafty stuff at home. My dad's super funny and has awesome taste in music. So we were kind of the weird family, I guess, in that sense that, like, we didn't like what everyone else liked a little bit. So there was encouragement behind, I want to do an art career. It wasn't like, get a real job, you bum. Because my sister was already out in the world, doing painting as her thing. So it wasn't foreign to my parents. So I think having encouragement for such a weird, unrealistic goal at an early age was good.
Nice. So how did you actually go from having this goal to, studying the craft and getting your first break?
Yeah, I was living in Pennsylvania at the time. I was actually supposed to, when we graduated from high school, all my friends, like, worked at the beach in the summer. I tried to get an internship at an animation studio in Pittsburgh. That didn't work out. But I just went to school. I went to Penn State University and I started studying fine art, film theory, and just general study stuff, just English, math classes, just read more than I ever took literature classes just because I realized like I wasted a lot of time in high school and I had a lot to learn. So they had like an Oxbury camera at Penn State. They had one teacher who kind of knew how to use it. They had one animation class that did like scratch on film and just scratching the emulsion off of film. And by that point, my dreams were getting bigger, and I could see like it wasn't going to go much further here at Penn State. So in the back of that book, the Shameless Culhane book, the one book that was in my hometown library, Animation from Script to Screen, it's the name of the book, had Columbia College as one of the possible schools to go to, like Sheridan, Columbia College, CalArts. That was like it. And so my sister was going to graduate school in Chicago at the time. She found out if it was still real, like legit, because the book was old. And I found out they had a pretty good animation program. And so I transferred from Penn State to Columbia College in Chicago, packed up a truck, moved to Chicago, and finished my degree there. Terrifying. Chicago is a very terrifying city if you're not used to big cities.
Okay.
So it was good in many ways, observing life outside of my own town to add to what I do. But I went from like campus life to like, you're gonna ride the subway to school, and you're gonna,
So you were basically just all in for animation at that point. You didn't have any hesitations. You're like, I'm gonna drop out of this current college, move to a different city, pack up all my belongings.
Hesitations and fears, but there was sort of this jump into the deep end sort of approach. It was deeply rooted in me, but like not outwardly. I was, pretty not that bold adventurer on the outside. But my sister she was sort of trailblazers. They were just like, one was in California and one was in New York, and I lived in Italy already. I'm like, oh, so the world's bigger. So like whatever fears I had about that, I was like, this is just part of it. Just bite your lip, get through it, and live in the city. So because the drive to do animation was always there, and we got to that like whatever at any cost, and then it became sort of following. When it started paying off, finding out that the school was pretty good. They were still they just started transitioning into digital at the time, so I was still shooting on Oxberries and still animating on paper, which I'm still a big fan of because I feel like it gave me really solid foundation skills. Because you don't have the forgiveness of constant undos and real-time playback and all that, like using exposure sheets. So I learned sort of old school ways that I've been reading about in that one book all this time. But being in that and just being around a few people like my friend Greg, who's super talented, and just being around people that were better than me, being around the environment of people who wanted it as much as I did, and seeing that it was somewhat of a reality in me. And there was enough going on in Chicago at the time that I could probably get work. And it was also at that time, like I said, when late 90s, mid 90s, when they're making The Lion King, and Disney's making a giant feature every year, and like you read stories of head animators making $100,000 a year at beginning salary. That of course all ended when I graduated. But being at Columbia College got me like all the teachers were working professionals. So there's one teacher who was working at a game company, and they were doing a Pinky and the Brain game. And me and my friend Aaron Johnson were able to do some freelance work for that teacher, like super low rate, but like, you're drawing the brain for money. Not bad. And then that got me an internship at a place called Cine in Chicago, which I'm still talking to those guys, for a summer. And then while I was at the internship, because their job postings wasn't as much of a thing. It was, it wasn't as, resources were still thin. But the guy I was interning with, Scott O'Brien, had heard that this studio called Star Tunes in the suburbs, which I'd heard about working on Tiny Toons, was now hiring people to work on Animaniacs. So I sort of got an inside tip, I guess, from having getting myself into actual studio early let me sort of get into the community early.
Yeah.
And so having that sort of one leg up, and then having some like actual like thinking the brain on my reel, and then having an internship, and doing good enough on my class assignments. There's some innate talent there. I mean, it was all I was still sucked and still had plenty to do, but I seemed to have a knack enough,
Yeah.
and that got me the job working on Animaniacs my last semester of college.
So you were pretty much already had your foot in the door in terms of studios while you were in college. Like when you
Yes.
graduated, did you just go immediately to working?
Yeah, yeah. I was getting partial credit for working part-time at the studio
Oh, nice.
through Columbia College. So I was working part-time, going to school part-time, basically getting like 3 credits worth for like working at a studio a couple days a week, and with the agreement that as soon as I graduated, I'd have a full-time job.
Oh, wow.
So
So,
that was
what was your role in Animaniacs when you were animating there? Like,
I was the lead animator. You start out as
just
like an yeah, you start out as an in-betweener. We were still doing stuff on paper, but we were digital ink and painting. And I in-betweened a couple scenes for I don't know, maybe 6 months, and then they let me move up to be an animator pretty quick. Um, yeah, it was kind of awesome. Like that was okay.
that is
There's the
pretty
thing.
awesome. You went
Yeah.
from like, at this other college thinking this isn't really for me to
Yeah.
packing up all your stuff, moving, and then becoming lead animator on like one of the
Yeah.
biggest kids shows what I
At the
grew up with.
time. Yeah, yeah. So like something that
That's
people
pretty
knew,
insane.
that people could, because that's the thing is like family and people who don't know animation, unless if they don't know what show you worked on, it doesn't
Yeah.
mean as much unless you're in it. But yeah, so that's sort of just trusting my like. There's something about this that's fascinating me. I want to learn how to do it. I have to change what I know to get there. Um, and so like those sacrifices like would mean nothing if I didn't take advantage of
Right.
opportunity.
Well, was there ever a moment that you felt like you couldn't do it or it was too much or challenging? Like what you just said, where trusting yourself, like that resonated with me because when I was in high school, I was like doing stop motion and I was like, this is
Uh-huh.
really what I want to do. But I was very hesitant because there was an opportunity. So that's why I went and chose a business career instead.
Yeah.
And now I'm coming back to this and kind of
Yeah.
leaning back into myself. So how do you really listen to that inner thing?
Uh, it's I don't know. Like I'm okay with discipline of learning. Like I think when you're in high school, if you're like the art person, the person who knows how to draw. If you're in a small town, you're like there's
Yeah.
always that small 2 or 3 people that are like good at art class, and their stuff gets in the glass cabinet all the time. But then I got to Penn State, and you're around everyone from every high school that's that person, and suddenly you realize, oh, I'm not that good. Um, and I'm taking this huge leap and this huge risk of taking on a silly career that would never take off in Pennsylvania. Um, I need to get better. It was the fear of failing at it.
Mm.
So like I like went hardcore into figure drawing and like basic drawing studies when I was at Penn State. So when I got to um, Columbia College, like I had done some animation. I was able to skip some classes. I was okay, but then I met all these people that came specifically for animation. So now they're really good. And now I have to catch up to them.
Yeah.
So I think it's a bit of the like I need to be better at this, and I need to stop just like relying on my reputation of like I'm a guy who can draw Bugs Bunny funny. Like there's a lot more to this, like the
Right, right.
reality of it. The magic wore off, and like no, you got a lot to learn. Um, and so it was about honing the craft for a long time, having a school that had structure to learn the basics of it. I would just go to Borders Books and get, at the time I could get for 50 cents, you can get coffee all day at Borders, which is no longer a thing apparently, if Borders are a thing. But I would get all the anatomy books, all the animation books, and I would just draw for them because I couldn't afford to buy them. So in between, like, I was making money walking dogs in Chicago. Walked dogs with Oprah once. Uh,
What?
yeah, with her dogs the new dogs that I took care of. Like they were like people who live in penthouses dogs. So I used to go to the same park as Oprah, and we'd occasionally hang out. So that was cool. Um,
That's super cool. Oh my God. What? How are
but
you doing all of this at the same time? Going to school, doing internships, studying like on top of your stuff,
I
walking
had no
dogs,
social life.
no social
I didn't
life.
have any. I didn't go out or do anything for like 3 years when I moved to Chicago. I was, like it was when like Greg and I, my friend I mentioned earlier, because we worked in the animation office, like we would sign out peg bars and it's time to use the pencil tester. So we just like hung out because we were working at school together and drawing together. But that was like 3 years into
Yeah.
school. Like I was just uh, kind of hyper focused, and I don't know anybody. I have nothing's familiar, so this is what you came here to do. It was sort of a heads down kind of thing.
Has that attitude changed for you over the years?
A little bit, yeah. I'm not as uptight about it. Like I feel like I still have plenty to learn, but I feel like I have a pretty solid foundation of the craft. Like um, I can get to the core of a character I'm animating because I'm not blocked by like perspective or drawing good volumes or any of that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. Like I put in tons of time, being an in-betweener, being an animator, being a cleanup person, like just drawing and drawing and drawing for shows or commercials for so long that it's like anything like playing a musical instrument or anything. You just kind of have to go through the motions a bunch till it becomes, you know, drawing. I used to start every day by just drawing freehand circles until I could draw them perfect.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So that because like animation always being sort of based on circles and just
Yeah.
like learning to draw with my arm and like all these like craft first stuff, which was fun to learn, like going to anatomy classes and going to sculpting to sculpt anatomy and being around people that thought that was just as cool as I did.
What about the leaning into your instinct part, like trusting in yourself? Has that changed at
Uh,
all for you?
no, that's still there. Like I think it's probably stronger now because it's got me this far. I mean, I've never lived in LA and I've had an entire 20 plus career in character-based animation.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So it's sort of, yeah, a little bit of trusting my gut and my instinct and facing sort of the uncertainty, the, you know,
Yeah.
um, take the risk.
Maybe you can give like a quick overview of some of the highlights of your career that jump out for you. Rough.
Sure. I wrote a little bit of a list to help me. I hope that's okay.
Oh, hey.
Um, so,
You
because
prepared
again,
for this.
I could go. I might slip in some new ones if they come to me. So the big things was that first job on Animaniacs because like that the whole dream became reality really quick. I'm still like friends with most of those people. That first job, sort of in the trenches together. My wife worked at that studio. That's where I met her. Um, she was the only woman director at the studio at the time, and then Greg ended up working there. So it's been talk about Greg a lot in this interview. But that
We'll
first
have him
job,
on next. I'll just talk about you. How about that?
yeah, it's perfect. But that's something about that first job is like this is this can actually happen. Um, the next highlight was while working in that job, I volunteered to help teach animation at a school in India that they were setting up. So at StarToons, they we typically any TV show typically you send the bulk of the animation to South Korea or to China or to the Philippines to get the animation done. Um, One of the background artists at StarToons was from India, moved back and wanted to start up a studio there. So this school, Heart Animation Academy in Hyderabad, India, was going to be a training center and then the studio for StarToons. But they needed someone to teach them like basic 12 principles of animation process that we use at StarToons. And I was 23. And at that point, I had the confidence because I got this job and like all of this like struggle and like doubt to get this far. I was kind of
Yeah.
like, for the first time feeling like, oh yeah, I got this. And so I was like, I'll do it. I'll go to India. I'd never left the country before, never been to Canada, never been, Chicago was like the biggest adventure of my life at that point. But I was like, yeah, I'll go live there for 5 months and help set up a school. Wendy and I wrote curriculum on the 12 basic principles, sort of a conglomeration of exercises that we have done and gotten from other teachers or things that we've made up. And I think that first experience of teaching stands out, not only because it was India, and that is a whole fascinating experience, but having to teach your craft. You spend all those years honing it, and then suddenly you have to explain it. and I had 300 students. I taught 150 in the morning and 150, and there was 3 languages to deal with. I had interpreters, and there's enough. It worked out, but like the curriculum that we wrote like ran out in 2 weeks because like I didn't put enough information in there. So I was like, oh my God, we're already done. So like I was like digging deep and trying to categorize the knowledge I had built for myself all these years in a way that I could communicate. And that honed my skills, because I had to like, you know, it wasn't just a box full of information. Now it was compartmentalized. I knew how to explain it. I understood why things worked and things didn't, whatever. But having to communicate it in a situation that had no other choice, because they hadn't had any teachers at the schools until I got there, and they were expecting like an old man from Disney to show up, one of the 9 old men to show up, and I'm like doopy doop, super pale, red hair, wearing a cowboy hat, coming off the plane. But so the teaching and being in India, all that around, was a pretty intense part of a career. Again, not what you'd expect, not what I envisioned reading that animation book back in the day, that I'd be in India, you know, with goats, limousines, and teaching animation. Because I was living in like a Bollywood neighborhood with Bollywood producers.
Oh my goodness! I feel like we could have a whole chat just on your.
We could. There's a lot of that.
Is the school still running there?
The school's not running, but a lot of my teachers' assistants, a lot of my students, either working at studios, started their own studios. One of them won an Oscar for working on the Tiger of Life of Pi.
Oh wow!
So they're all still. I still talk to a lot of them, a lot of my students, and so most of them are pretty successful. That's also like very encouraging to like know that, like, you know, even though I was teaching those basic knowledge, like I was able to share that somewhere. So that's where I sort of got that bug of like sharing the information that you build over the years. Sorry, I'm rabbit holing.
That's no, it's fine. I'm also wondering what was kind of like, why were students coming to the school in India? If it was just like this startup new thing, were they kind of similar stories to people here where they saw animation on TV and wanted to do it?
Yeah, it was like it was a job in art, you know, and it was and in some ways, you know, it might have been false advertising, or it was like a way to get to Hollywood. And like, I wasn't in Hollywood. I don't know why they're telling you that, but I think, yeah, the Tinkerbell does. Animation does have its magic to it. And those of us that do it and get into it and stay in it, have some connection to it. So I think that's one thing I like about it, because I've done things in India, I've done things in Mexico. And it's the same sort of, when you find that enthusiasm for a craft that you've spent so much time with, it's encouraging.
That's really incredible. Yeah.
So, yeah, I got to share. I made it to 2 things on my list. Back
to career highlights.
Okay, so job, India, working at Calabash Animation in Chicago, which was a studio that they were known for doing all the Lucky Charms commercials, Trix Rabbit, Toucan Sam, like all of those sort of icon Saturday morning serial commercial characters. And the quality and the caliber of it was really high.
Yeah.
So like that even boosted because we were shooting on ones. We were
you were animating there, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah, I was animating.
So like when I watched like Saturday morning cartoons and like Toucan Sam comes on, that was you?
Back in the day, yeah. Not just me. I mean, like,
one of you.
I probably have touched it, yeah. So that was, everyone in Chicago who was doing that kind of animation went through the doors of Calabash. And they're still there. They're still going strong. Still friends with a lot of people there. But that experience of like, because I went from television animation to commercial animation, where suddenly the budgets were higher and you could redo a scene a couple times. Versus like you got to get it out because we're losing money on TV if you don't get that scene done. But like the same budget for 30 seconds, you can finesse a scene and work with some really talented people to see how they're finessing a scene. So again, it was like another jump up in craft. My drawing skills just got really good at that time. So that was like, there's a lot of other Chicago stories, but that's sort of where I ended up in Chicago. And then Wendy and I moved up to Minnesota, where she's from, and we lived in her sister-in-law's basement for a while.
Wait, so you're like pretty successful animators living in Chicago, and you decide to uproot back to your sister-in-law's basement.
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah, being around family a little bit, wanted to try that again.
Okay.
And
Did you feel like you were throwing away some of your career,
it
or?
was it was it was a little scary for sure. But at this point, like so many weird things had like ended up in my path. That whole trusting your sort of gut thing is like I can figure out wherever I go. I can
Yeah,
figure this
yeah,
out. And also because like I liked being around Wendy. And I have a big thing about like the people that core group of people that you're around, staying connected to them matters too, as much as
yeah,
the
yeah.
career does. Because when the career sucks, it's nice to have those people around. Um,
And when they suck, then what?
well, then
Back
you
to the
have to be you
career.
have to flip, yeah. You can bounce back and forth, or you just have to have good judgment in people. So moving up, living in my sister's basement in the suburbs of Minneapolis, and then realizing that like all of the connections I had made, all my jobs had been like word of mouth. I had like one interview that whole time.
Wow.
That first 10 years or 13 years in Chicago. Um, and it's still how the community is in general. Like it's big, but not very big. You're usually 2, 3 people removed. So being in a place where no one knew me, knew what I was capable of, knew my history, I had to like get that word out there. But I was living out of the city, the Twin Cities, without a car. We were still doing stuff for Calabash. Was working on a friend's film for like we made like $14,000 one year working on a short film, and that was it.
Oh, wow.
So it was like having to start from scratch a little bit. And also, even up to this time, I was still like working on paper and slowly getting myself into digital. I didn't learn any of it in college because they were just transitioning to digital stuff, and it really wasn't there yet. So I was teaching myself Flash, and I was learning that stuff and telling clients like, sure, I know how to do that, and just trying to find any kind of animation work um, locally, and just like getting to know who's here and trying to get into the city as much as possible.
How
Go
did
to
how did
school.
you actually do that though? Because you said you were out of the city, don't have a car.
Yeah.
How did you connect with people or even studios to get that work?
I found out who they were, and I did a lot of cold calling and showing up.
Like,
Um,
hello, this is Mike. I
yeah,
animated a commercial you might have seen a couple of years
yeah,
ago.
yeah. I mean, the thing is, like, you get to the animation community, and then people here in the animation community go, like, "Oh yeah, we know Calabash,"
Ah, okay.
because General Mills is based here, which is
Yeah,
General
yeah.
Mills was a lot of the characters we did. So again, community is small, but it was just like introducing myself to what was here, who was here, but also trying to find some freelance work. Wendy had to, because two of us doing animation, freelance animation was not a way to like get out of a basement. So Wendy, who can pick up pretty much any skill, moved into marketing for a while.
Oh,
Then worked at a science museum for a while until she came back to animation. Anyhow, that's like sort of the arc of the whole thing. But coming back to how I found the work, it is cold calling, meeting those people, finding out who the studios were in town, going to MCAD, going to Art Institute, trying to get some teaching. I did that, getting teaching jobs there, and just trying to infuse myself into the community.
would you
Um,
say that still works today for people or yourself? Just if like cold calling studios
I
and stuff?
have no problem with it. I mean, you can like anything, you can go too far and be obnoxious about it. But I think if you're not coming in asking for something, like you're like, I want a job. If you're just like, here's who I am, this is what I do. I'm in town, would like to know more about what you guys do. You're not asking.
Non-invasive. Yeah,
Yeah,
pretty
yeah, and
casual.
it's informational interviews are. I tell students that all the time. Like an informational interview is a great thing to try, and it's if the person doesn't give it to you, then you probably don't want to work around that person anyhow. Because
Yeah.
I am happy to do that for people, and I know a lot of people that are. I mean, we're all busy and we all have time, but if that's all you're asking for, sure, I'll give you some, insight. I'll let you know because if people know your name and they find out you do good work, that's how you get work. It's not job listing thing as much. I've like again, my entire career, 2 interviews, I think. Um, I tried to get other work. Uh, I was a school photographer here for a while for Life Touch photography, and it was awful. No, sorry, Life Touch, but it was awful.
You mean wait, you were like taking pictures of graduation photos and
Yeah,
whatnot? Did
yeah,
you?
wagon
Oh
wheel.
no!
Yeah, yeah,
Tilt your head.
yeah, yeah, all that stuff. But you couldn't touch them because, like, that rules had changed at that point. So, like, do this and like, and I took a lot of like senior high school pictures where seniors didn't want to be there. Anyhow, it was miserable. A lot of team building exercises that in a world that I don't like. But that was like, but I need to make money.
Yeah.
But I had one in that time. I went to the training. I worked at Life Touch for a month. I had one thin opportunity for freelance animation work, and I was like, "Sorry, Life Touch, I got to quit. I got this freelance gig that I'm doing," and the gig never came through.
Oh,
But
what?
but it was enough for me to take the chance, and like I don't know how to do anything else, um, and I can't go out like this.
So how did you end up getting the ball rolling again, where you were at a comfortable place with your
Uh,
animation career?
that's when got hired at Puny Entertainment. Um, it started out as part-time, then I ended up becoming the animation director. So that was just through like starting to know who was hiring.
Man,
Met
as soon as someone hires you, you just work your way to the top.
Sure.
Intern, lead animator,
Yeah,
part-time
just
director.
you insert yourself, but you have to back it up.
Yeah.
That's it. Like you can be, there's a tendency maybe for animators to be timid, not outward going. Um, but fake it for a little bit just to get out
So
there.
would you attribute what you just said to how you worked? I mean, worked your way up. It depends on where you want to go with your career,
Uh,
but what you just said, being outgoing and not timid, and I guess
Being unafraid to approach people, like I think there's more forgiveness of people, like they come in like you're an artist and you're like maybe you're not that super articulate, but they'll be like, okay, fine, it's animation, it's cool.
so you came in part-time and you said, "Hey, I want to make this full-time," and somebody was like, "Yeah, sure."
Yes, for this job it was. For Ed Puny, it was great because they were the only people in town that wasn't doing advertising or medical animation. Like there's a lot of animation. There's one commercial studio called RealWorks they weren't really hiring anybody. That's 3D was mostly what people wanted to do. But in town, there's a lot of motion design, motion graphics, medical, advertising, because there's big advertising agency here, big corporate headquarters, Target, Best Buy, what have you,
Yeah.
General Mills. Um, but I was still like at heart a character animator, and so Puny was made up of a lot of like comic book artists, illustrators, a couple animators, uh, and and also people that were making games. It was a small little boutique studio, but they were doing the most interesting work in town, hand drawn stuff. So I got to know them through like art crawls and stuff, where like the art community let you come into their studio, and I got to meet them a couple times. And at that time was making some digital work, working in Flash, doing some tests for different people. And so I was like, here's my current reel. Can I come work part-time? They said, sure. Because there wasn't a whole lot of character animators in town.
Huh.
And because there wasn't a lot of opportunity for character animators in town. But I had a unique experience. I was like characters that people knew and, that were nationwide known characters. So I had a handle on that stuff. And they were doing some General Mills work, but they were just doing interesting character-based, design-based stuff. So I always wanted to be in that environment. And that's where, I ended up being there for like 9 years, probably longer than I worked anywhere in Chicago now that I think about it. But that was, small studio, but that was the next sort of plateau.
Gotcha.
So at least like pits of like struggle, success.
Nice. So, how are you feeling these days?
Fine.
Fine. So maybe this is a good opportunity to talk about Danger and Eggs and how that whole story happened. If you're watching this on YouTube, there's just an egg looking extremely worried, staring at you from the background this entire time. You have this giant blow up, life-size character
Yeah.
of him.
Yeah, Philip's great. He's technically 6'3".
Oh wow. So
Well, not
let's
in that.
chat
Yeah,
about how it came to be, because I know you had the idea for something like 6 years or something before it actually
it was 6 years of
developed.
pitching it.
6 years of pitching it.
Yeah, so I think about how this whole thing plays out. Because Danger, like I'll just throw this back to that list. Puny and Danger and Eggs were the next two things on my list. So
Hey,
because it happened through.
we're following your list just naturally here.
Yeah. So it's all flowing right now. Yeah, I had been thinking about the character before I ever worked at Puny of just Philip. It wasn't Danger and Eggs. It was just Philip the Safety Egg. Just this idea of I wanted to do a character that was not driven by, but like constantly facing his fears. And he was very, fragile and neurotic. And it also fit the philosophy of funny shapes doing funny things. It's just sort of like, it's why SpongeBob is successful. He's, but I believe like that's the success of the basis of a good character, funny shapes doing funny things. But a fragile character that had to deal with his own fear all the time, but he was prepared. So I had this character for a long time and drew it, tried to do different things. Tried to make it in 3D with some local 3D artists. Just a character that struck a nerve with me because it was very much based on me. And working at Puny, they wanted so Shadi Petoskey and Vincent Stahl, who owned Puny, and Shadi Petoskey, you'll see, is the co-creator of Danger and Eggs as a show. So they wanted to make a short, because at this time we were doing, at Puny we were doing a lot of, we were doing games, but we were also doing a lot of story-based stuff, and we were doing stuff for Cartoon Network and doing Yo Gabba Gabba's animation. And so this like entertainment character stuff was what Puny really wanted to do. So they did a collaboration between Puny and an improv group in town called Splendid Things. And the idea would be that everyone in the studio would pitch an idea to Splendid Things. They would pick it and they would improv a script and we would animate it, and that would be the story.
Oh, wow. That's kind of fun.
Yeah, it was a great experiment. And so I was like, well, I guess I should bring Philip in. Like, I haven't been able to make it go anywhere else, so I'm going to put together a pitch here. And the Splendid Things liked it. They were drawn to this idea of Philip, this giant paranoid first aid master egg. So we made this short. Character evolved a little bit. We're working with Shadi and with, I'm forgetting his last name now, Will Shepard. He was a writer on Dr. Katz. I don't know if you remember that show, Dr. Katz, like the Squiggle Vision, sort of comedians doing therapy animation. Super funny dude. But working with them to I was stuck with Philip as a character. Like, how do I make this bigger? How do I make this to a world? And then in those creative sessions with Shadi and Will was, why not make Philip 6 foot tall like a sports mascot, and then the chicken that he lives in, because at this point he was literal egg size. The chicken he lives in is like Godzilla-sized chicken that tramples the city as he comes through. So he feels obligated to go out and perform first aid and help everybody. So that suddenly opened up what the show could be. Still no Dee Dee Danger, still no Danger part of the Danger and Eggs, just egg part, just Philip part. So that's all we pitched to the improv group, and we just put him in Puny, built a sound booth in the basement. And that was the basic premise, and we gave him a day to just improv stuff. And one guy at Puny edited together. They worked with the group to edit together a basic story, I guess. And we went from there, and I started storyboarding it from there, directing that. We made the short, put it in some festivals, did okay in some places, ran out of money, so I was sort of the one, I was paying for the entry fees and stuff because it was my character. But it got enough of attention, and it was viable. Like, oh yeah, that is a pretty funny character. Eric Noble, who's the voice of Philip then and now, who's part of this improv group, the original improv group, is still the voice of Philip.
Oh, nice.
Because he was like 120% perfect when he first voiced Philip. Like, it was exactly the voice I'd heard in my head. All these, like, so 2003 was like the first sketch I did of Philip. And I've always heard this voice. I don't know how it was. Again, you just got to trust these things that fall in front of you, I guess. So the success of that, and then Puny, like, pitching was sort of part of the business plan for Puny. At that point, Vincent was running the office in Minneapolis, and then Shaddy opened one up in LA just to sort of be in the circle of LA and get those meetings and like, you know, hear that word of mouth that comes down, and be able to pitch stuff to the actual people and not just some weird pitch competition or something like that.
Right. Yeah.
So pitching was always sort of a part of Puny's grand plan. Danger and Eggs eventually was the one that hit and got greenlit, but it failed for 6 years. People couldn't, like a Neurotic Egg, could that carry a show? It was iffy. It's like pitching a show, you know, our pitches were like paragraphs upon paragraphs of information. And then you realize like no one's going to read that. And you know, like the idea of like,
did you refine the pitch over those 6
yeah,
years?
we refined the pitch. We added Dee Dee Danger as a character based on, I think it was Cartoon Network. Our friend over Kevin Lee over at Cartoon Network, I think, was like, if he had like if Philip had a friend or a buddy to sort of, they could play off of each other, you might have better luck selling the show, because like like a neurotic lead alone in the world as a character was like, people couldn't see it. They're like, yeah, very funny character. We like the idea. Is it a show? I don't know. Are we looking for that kind of show right now? I don't know. It's all about timing and who the executive you're talking to, but
so did Puny just have like a whole bunch of pitches that they had in like a stack, and every time, you know, they had a conversation with someone, they were like, and there's also Danger and Eggs.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's one thing I learned, and something I still do, is always have more than one. And like, no pun intended, but all eggs in one basket is not good.
Right.
Because if like whatever reason someone doesn't like an idea, you don't know what it's going to be. Like one time I was in LA and I was pitching somewhere, and they're like, please don't tell me you have anything about a Yeti. We have seen so many Yeti stories this year. I've seen 3 this week. If you show me a Yeti story, and if I had only a Yeti story, I'd be screwed.
Yeah, exactly.
So I've learned that in pitches, it is a good idea to like have a couple in your back pocket, because, you know, what if they're not looking for a comedy? What if they're looking for sci-fi adventure shows? What if they're, you know, which we had, because it's fickle of what's going to get picked up when. You know, like the stars a lot of times have to align no matter how good your pitch is.
See, I've also heard, maybe not competing, but like different advice where the thing you're pitching, you have to appear like you're all in on this, and this is your baby, and like you're devoting all of your energy into this, versus I have a library over here of pitches.
Yeah, I think you can certainly lead with one. Because it becomes clear what you're the most passionate about. But I think there's something about having you lead with the thing that you're the most passionate about, of course. Mm-hmm. And there's something about having other stuff shows that you're a maker and that you're a storyteller and that you can do this. Like, you're not a one-trick pony, I guess. Gotcha. So it sort of shows you as a creator and as an inventor of ideas. Like you're this isn't it. This isn't all you have. But you still, like, you know, the passion that we had for Danger and Eggs obviously came through eventually. But it was, by the end, our pitch was like, there might have been 50 words in it, mostly artwork and little Philip phrases he was saying, episode lists, and then who we were as creators. Like, because it is about knowing you as a person, not just the idea for a network to, like, we have to spend time with these people and, like, what are they going to like to work with? So there's so many factors I just didn't anticipate, like, you know, but I drew this awesome egg. Why won't you make a show? It makes me laugh. Doesn't that count for something? I mean, it does count for something, but not everything, because, you know.
So if
they're going to throw a lot of money at it. So, like, you know, if they can't see it as a show.
So if the initial idea of the neurotic egg never changed, like the idea at the core was always there, what was the final selling point that, you know, got it picked up?
I think it was a simple pitch, the addition of Dee Dee, and the prior work we had done leading up to that. Because I think that 6 years, then, like, even though it was getting turned down, we were still doing like 2-minute shorts for Nickelodeon's Summer Shorts program. We were doing storyboards for Disney shorts.
Gotcha.
So we were learning how to do a show and honing our craft, and maybe that's part of it, sort of like testing the waters with us as a small studio. Because the fact that we even produced this series is crazy. but we are honing our craft. Not now, like earlier, I was talking about honing the craft of being an animator. Now it's of making a show, working with the team, doing the whole pipeline. So I think everything started like we clearly had a good track record. We were doing some pretty interesting stuff. So like people were talking about us in LA. Um, People saw the development of the pitch. Like we went back to the same people in the same studios. When they see that you're taking their advice a little bit, you know, you don't have to completely kowtow to anybody, but they see that like, because they're not giving you advice just to be jerks. Like they're just telling you what works and what doesn't. And if your ego's too high to like, no, it's all or nothing, you know, maybe you'll get it picked up by somebody, and or maybe you'll come into a bunch of money and make it yourself. But seeing that you didn't give up, seeing that you developed the idea, and then finally came like the characters are really clear. The dynamic between Philip and Dee Dee finally made sense because we had to invent Dee Dee. And Philip was such a big personality. How do you match that, and how does that dynamic work? And we were figuring that out through season one. But Dee Dee's basically the opposite of Philip, right? It was like, like, what's the first thing you do? Opposite, fearless and fearful, and it was enough. And writing the backstories of Dee Dee. So see that advice was good. A pair because they can sort of bounce off each other. They
Yeah.
can, you know, there's a sounding board. Um, Character relationships and dynamics are super interesting. It's, you know, it's the Odd Couple. It's Tom and Jerry. It's, you know,
Right.
Homer.
So sometimes when I come up with an idea for something like a show or whatnot, I have everything like so solidified in my head that I almost have like a mental block of changing aspects,
Sure.
like adding another character or
It's
removing something.
tough.
Did you ever experience that
Oh,
on
yeah,
Danger
yeah.
Mix? Because it was kind of your
Yeah,
baby, your
yeah.
baby gig?
It's right away saying like "fuck you." That's I know what's what. And sorry for
Right.
swearing on your podcast. Um, but yeah, no, it's hard to take, and it's something you have to kind of learn because like if that's what you want, then you can work alone. Like you can, more so now than ever. So like if that's what it needs to be, but how long and labor intensive and how many resources it takes to do animation, you kind of have to suck it up a little bit. It's like a heightened version of getting a critique in art school. You know, just take it. Like no one's trying to hurt you, and if they are, then like learn to recognize that. But
But
um,
you said suck it up. Do you overcome that feeling and actually like, the result is better than I expected, or
yeah,
do you feel
you
still
have to
that
buy
there's
yourself
yeah,
those surprises, and also, but know your boundaries. Like, nah, Philip wouldn't do that.
right.
But be willing to work with people that like, you know, the idea when Philip started, he was this egg, and then someone said, make him 6 foot. And there was a party that was like, bullshit. I'm
He's
not
not.
doing
He's
that.
an
But
egg.
then,
What are you talking about?
yeah, but then like suddenly like the jokes changed and like he became more awkward. Like, so you're like, okay, this is what collaboration means. You know, that's what, when I say suck it up, it's like realize you're not in this alone. Um, but, you know, knowing your parameters of a character, knowing where, you know, the line in the sand for you, but there has to be flexibility and compromise in this business because there's so many people trying to do the same thing.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So for you overall, what was the success of Danger and Eggs? Like it got made. Is that the success that you wanted out of it and you felt? Like what was the highlight of like
Good.
this whole
Yeah.
experience over years and years and years?
Yeah, that is a good question. I wrote a bunch of good stuff, so I'm looking for it right now. Where is it on your list of questions? Hold
Scroll
on.
through the notes.
Oh, there it is. Define success. Yeah, getting made is one of the big successes, honestly.
Yeah.
You know, to know like this is a show of a character that's been in my head. You know, like made a show. Like that's that's the thing. You know, that's one of the dreams, right?
What was the
Um,
what was the feeling you got? Like if you think of all the highlights of working on that show, what was the highest light feeling? Was
Oof.
it was it when they're like, we're green lighting this?
Yeah, that's tough because that's one of those things that's like the most exciting, but you're also throwing up. Because like the reality of what it takes to make it, and it's terrifying. It's like awesome and terrifying. It's a little like it's a roller
It's excited
coaster.
puke.
It's like a not a roller coaster, but it's like a carnival ride where like the bolts might be loose.
Oh my gosh.
Like thrilling, but like this could all fall apart in our faces really quick because we're not in LA. We're not, you know, we've never, none of us, I've worked on plenty of series, but I've never done a series, and so many factors. So that's thrilling and terrifying. Uh, and it's amazing that things get made. Honestly, the one of the high points for like, there's a couple of them, but the one that always stands out for me is once we were like green light, we got past like the pilot season on Amazon, they greenlit a full series because that's how Amazon did it back then. Like just we'll do pay for a pilot, we'll see what the audience thinks, and then we'll go to the series. So making the series, we had this split production in LA, in St. Paul, Minnesota, in New York, and in Korea. I was running the storyboard and animatic team, all with people who had never done this before. All like local artists, some animators, mostly comic book people. But getting the studio set up, the deadline, it's just this train. Once the green light goes, it's awesome, but the train is coming at you full speed. So that thrill of that full speed train, and then I have everyone in my team on the floor working. I'm in my office. It feels like it's starting to make sense. And then hearing everyone on the floor sort of laughing, and like my raw ego at that time was like, are they laughing at me? Like, what's going on? Am I a fool? Is this because I had so many like self-doubts about this thing on top of being exciting? But when I went out to find out what they were laughing at, they're like, oh, we're just drawing Philip. It's just so much fun. Like he's just like, they're just like getting joy out of drawing this character. For me, that was it. Because like that's the joy I got, and to know that got somehow translated and people were seeing the joy in this character and wanting to work on it, that was great because they were adding humor to him. Like Philip's got this big surface of an egg face, right? And his face can sort of slide around. And then Joe, one of our storyboard artists, when Philip would get really like closed off and timid, he would make Philip's face really, really tiny. And like it was, how far can we push that? And he pushed it as far as he possibly could. And it's like, is Amazon going to like it? But it was so funny, And it's like, to know that you set up parameters of a character that people could play and make it even better. Yeah. That was a pretty good moment.
What do you mean is Amazon going to like it? Do they review each episode? And they're like, we don't like this part. We don't like this part.
Yeah,
like, who's reviewing that on their end? Is it an animator? Is it
the executive? The executive of that show, like executives, they bring in different shows. They're sort of the gatekeeper to the higher ups. But there was the executive who then has to report to the head of children's programming, who then has to go to there's still a chain of command within Amazon to deal with.
Oh man,
the pilot went all the way up to not Bezos but to Roy Price, the guy that was running Amazon Studios before he got ousted, but like it had to go just to get the green light.
And if somebody along the way is like, I don't like how small this face is, then it goes back to you?
Yeah. So like refining the notes process was something else as well. Like having a good producer that was helping me do that. He had never worked in animation before either, but he'd worked on a lot of stuff and was just comfortable in stress situations.
So how do you know when the right time is to push for something? Like if you really believe in that joke, like having for example, the small face.
Yeah.
Would that be something that you would push and say, no, this has to happen?
Yeah, you have to it's a pick your battles sort of thing, and like learning that on the job. And it's, because things could get cut because the standards and practices people are nervous because we're going to get sued. That could make a joke go bad. Not just someone not liking, but you had to sort of, the episodic directors, what their instincts and what was funny to them had to report to me. Then Shaddy and I had to review that, and that had to go to Amazon. So there were many things to go through. And you had to sort of systemize the notes and say, here's our first cut of the animatic. We need notes back by this day. We promise a 2-day turnaround. You have to promise that this 2-day turnaround notes, and we promise we'll get the notes executed by the end of the week. So like everyone, the deadlines do not fluctuate in a series. Like maybe they do in other series, but like we did not. We had 2 teams running. We were doing 2 episodes at a time. We were, inventing things as we went along. But I'm sorry, what was the question again? The question was about.
It was about how to know when to push.
Things. Yeah, but it's again a little bit of gut instinct stuff, and like going to, like, if my director thought what an idea was funny, and I would go to bat for my director and say like, I think it's funny, and so like I would support that. And then there's compromises, like you get a list of notes, you do the feedback session. Someone types all those notes out. Someone time codes all those notes out, and we're like, there's no time for that. Easily, we can do that. We can do that. That won't work. But what if we do this? Like, that's how we would like this is how we're going to solve them before we do them, because it could be endless, and there
Oh
could
my
be
gosh.
endless
I
division.
almost feel like it would, like TV shows maybe, and would push boundaries more to be a little bit maybe more entertaining if it didn't go through so much,
Yeah,
so many people or whatnot. Like, is that a
yeah.
detriment to
No,
it, or is it
it
actually
can
improve
be. It can be. Yeah. I mean, if you get like the decision maker being, if it's Gennady Tartakovsky is the decision maker, he's the last word out the door, then you're going to get something different. You just sort of have to, balance your instinct of like, I really think this is funny and this is exactly what this character would do at this moment. I really think this is what we should do, or what you're asking is going to completely negate something that happens in Act 3. And so maybe they're just not thinking about it long term, because like if you make Philip say that, then this joke makes no sense later, or whatever.
Right.
So it's a bit of compromise. It's a bit of like, I'll fight for these couple things. Sometimes you throw in a red herring, which is just like something obviously bad, like that's the wrong character. And then you fix that, and everyone feels happy. And you've already made the change anyhow. Red herrings are great tricks, by the way, with client work. Throw in one
Something wrong on
something
purpose.
very obviously wrong. Let them call it out, compliment on how observant they are. Everyone's happy. And
Don't they feel like you're not paying attention if it's so wrong, though? Or do they feel special that they caught it?
my experience has been they feel special because they are.
Interesting.
But it's that's again another sort of side tactic. But
Right.
it's compromise, it's management of the workflow, personalities, it's the timeline, the ever pressing timeline. So you sort of learned to when to push.
Yeah.
And when not to push, what was worth the time. Like we had episodes that we took out of our order because it just wasn't working, and we finished it later because we had to move. We had to move the order of some episodes because we were just hitting brick walls with some things.
So you were the supervising director
Mm-hmm.
on this show, but how, like, you never had experience before as a supervising director?
Well, as animation director at Puny, I was technically that.
Okay. Because I was just wondering, like,
Yeah.
say for instance, uh, if I get a show picked up, do I automatically
Not
become,
automatically.
like, how does that work? Because it's like you hear stories where like Pendleton Ward is like at Cal Arts and then gets Adventure Time made, and now he's the director of a showrunner of Adventure Time. So like, how, if somebody pitches a show and it gets picked up,
Uh-huh.
what is their usual involvement with that show,
Depends
or how
on
did you
yeah,
become
it
the
depends on
supervisor?
their if depends on your skill in the industry. If you're like you wrote this great idea but you're not the animator and you have never directed any animation, then you're not going to be supervising director probably.
So it's still up to the studio to decide, like, in their best interest
Yeah,
to.
I mean it was interesting because it was Puny was the studio, was the production studio,
Right.
and so that's
You've been there 9 years.
yeah. So and I used to working with other animators on the team, but this scale was very different and multiple locations. So I mean, I actually started out just like I was a episodic director, and I was doing storyboards for one of the episodes, and my friend Vince was doing another one, and it was like I had to keep my eye on everything, like all of the episodes. I had to review. I had to work with the animatic editor on everything. I had to work with the character designer because they were designing characters that looked like my characters, but I never had to explain that before, and so it was we're trying as the scripts are coming in. So there's a lot of stuff that I had to like be aware of and like get and support my crew that was putting in all the work. So I couldn't have my head down and do the artwork and do the storyboard. So we had to promote two lead boys to episodic director so I could become supervising director. But because it was, came in as a co-creator, my chances of being supervising director, and I had tons of animation experience and working for the other co-creator, she was my boss, but also the co-creator of the show. So we had this proven track record of making stuff together.
Right.
So it came down to like, it was the natural fit. We had Amazon brought in Brian Cheesley, who's an animation director. He worked on Simpsons and Futurama, and he's a pretty awesome dude. And he came to St. Paul for like a month to just sort of like help us keep it on the tracks. And Amazon just paid for him to be here in St. Paul for a while, which was great. I mean, like, to learn from someone like that, because there's a lot of sort of learn from those that have done it before in this, apprenticeshipy sort of approach to stuff. And he just had been through the ringer before. He's worked through seasons and seasons of shows.
Right.
So you can anticipate the drama, the struggle, the bottlenecking, how to like just the idea of we run into a story problem, take everyone off their computers, grab a pile of Post-it notes, and let's solve the problem together, as a way to like keep the crew energized and feel like they're all working on the same project. Nice. So how it works as far as like getting that role, because I've never worked in a giant studio, I can't really speak to, but I think, I believe that if it's your show or your pitch, your idea, and you've got animation chops and you've been in that studio for a while, chances are good. If you've been making the show online for a while and suddenly they pick it up, maybe the chances are good. But if you're used to working alone and can't work with 300 people, you might get replaced.
Right.
And just become, consultant, or like, it's all in the contract. All that stuff is negotiable to some degree. Like, it wasn't guaranteed that we were executive producers. We asked for it. It wasn't guaranteed that, we'd be able to do it partially in St. Paul, but we asked for it. Nice. And so it's any other hustle of a business deal. Once you get into it, like, I don't have that fear of like, oh my God, it's Amazon. Like, I mean, it's still Amazon, but it's like, I don't have any intimidation factor when I talk to an executive.
Right.
Because you realize like everyone's still trying to just do their thing. They're like people who eat and have children and walk their dogs, have bad days and stuff. And there's that, you just sort of like, all things are possible. Doesn't mean they're easy.
I gotcha.
It's a long way to answer the supervising director question. So I apologize for that, but
I apologize.
But I think if you've learned, you're like, hearing anything in my story is like, there's sort of an idea of the path, and then there's the path you take.
I really like how agile you seem to be throughout your career and like figuring things out. That's awesome. So you also mentioned that once you're a director, you weren't kind of drawing anymore. Other people were drawing for you, stuff like that. Whereas before, you're lead animator and animating all the time. What was kind of the biggest mental shift you had to take from being part of a production to running the production and not being part of it anymore?
Good question. Mental shift is sort of taking care of the crew meant a lot, and you sort of like, I never forced anyone to work over a weekend, which is unheard of in TV animation.
That's great.
If they wanted to, they could, but like, I'm a big fan of like resets, because you come back on Monday, I don't want you fried, because I have done that. I think I've been through every stage of production that I have enough of an empathy and understanding of what I'm asking of people.
Yeah.
So I think it was, again, just like when I was talking about teaching, when you have to communicate a thing, you have to suddenly organize your thoughts. So now
you have to kind of get out of your head a little bit and see
totally.
like see the macro picture of everything.
Yeah, very much so. Every day, like I didn't sleep a lot during the production of Danger and Eggs, and I walked home a lot. Like, it was like lots of anxiety, it was a lot. It was the hardest.
You were basically the egg character then.
100%. Like, it was the egg character that was smoking cigarettes at the time. I was smoking egg at the time. But I made it a point when I'd come into the studio space and we had Danger and Eggs on the door. As soon as I saw the logo on the door and touched the doorknob, anything I was like anxious about or mad about or ready to quit about, I had to set aside, because if the crew sees that in me, it's going to have a ripple effect.
Yeah.
And like, any doubts they're having, they're going to feel justified in like wanting to walk away and wanting to quit and like not wanting to like, that this is stupid. So
that's a lot to take on. That's like pretty heavy.
Yeah, it especially for like, having like, a decent amount of anxiety to begin with. But it was important because like I we were asking hard things from people who hadn't done this before, and I wanted it to be good. I wanted people to enjoy the experience as much as possible, but I needed them to work really hard.
Yeah.
So, but like it was definitely I had to flip a switch on my own attitude when I was in the studio space. I just had to.
Gotcha. So you also mentioned before that, people were working on this show all over the world. There's like 300 people involved,
Yeah.
and you were kind of, you had to unite everybody with the vision that you had. You
Yeah.
mentioned one kind of like tip or trick was when you're solving a problem to bring everybody in to like brainstorm together. How do you also, when you're working across borders, make sure that everybody's executing the same
Mm.
visions? It seems like a cohesive show coming out of your brain, not like kind of
Yep.
a collage of different stuff that ends up
Yeah.
being like many cooks in the kitchen.
Yeah. I would say being really organized with your production,
Yeah.
um, like having really good model packs of your model sheets, your props, your daytime, nighttime colors, all that, and your storyboards being almost keyframe animation, to be honest.
Oh, wow.
Like it's not, when you look at a feature film and there's just loose work drawn on boards and having a good time, like everything had to be on model. Um, we
Really?
almost every little eye shift or any little subtle thing that I wanted the character to do, because like Sayram is an amazing amount of work that they do, and that ours wasn't the only show they were working on, but they're just gonna execute what you give them. So if you
Yeah.
just like assume someone's gonna plus something, you assume incorrectly, because then you learn that you get the board back. It's like it's so stiff. Like Philip's not doing anything Philippy. Like it's what's going on here. But you had to like the scripts were locked or was by the time we started boarding, but you had to have all that dialogue on there. You had to have all of your notes, like Philip blinks twice,
Oh,
squeaky sound. He's adjusting his gloves here, and like you had to spell out everything because they don't have time to like and think about what you might be thinking about. It's clarity, organization, and clarity. Um, and at the very beginning, like the first animation test we were getting back, I was like, because I had animated Philip before that and know him very well. So all I did was like, this is how Philip would pick up an object he found on the ground. And I showed them my key poses, my breakdowns, and my in-betweens in 3 stages and how I think about Philip when I stage him. And they were like, oh, got it. And it was fine after that. Like they're pros beyond belief. But it's that clarity of, I learned that I give my best notes by doing drawovers. If I can draw something to explain it, it locks in quicker than me trying to like intellectualize why something's funny or not,
right.
or why
Yeah, deconstructing it.
yeah, like why a pose isn't working, or like why does Dee look weird in this shot. So I did a lot of like, here's how to think about drawing her, and we invented a whole system of stick figure boarding because we had to do everything on model. Like I broke a little bit of what I think normally how this stuff is done, but I had the episodic directors like they could do the entire thing in these stick figures, like still like the proportions of the characters, but egg, stick, arms and legs. Dee
Yeah.
Dee is like peanut head and a little rectangle for a body with stick arms and legs. So let them block out that way. Let the directors get through an entire episode blocked out where they don't have to think about anything but like basic proportions and staging and blocking. Get that approved. Like I had every week was an approval. Get everyone to sign off enough on the stick figure, and then they could go to our lead board artist who would plus the scenes, add some acting. We'd get reviews on that, and then we would go to our revisionist and our cleanup artist to put everything on model. And we were using Storyboard Pro, so eventually we learned how to use libraries and all that, and everyone was sort of sharing we'd make files of good Philip faces and Dee faces and all that. So it grows as, the more you do. But it's,
So does
yeah,
that mean some of the earlier episodes are, maybe stiff's the wrong word, but like not as expressive as the later ones got, if everybody's kind of learning?
a little bit, yeah. But fortunately, when we released them, we mixed up the order because we did all 26.
Oh, okay.
Because like a lot of times on TV, you do 6, they put them out while you're making the other 6. We
Yeah.
did all 26 in a year, or 10 months or whatever.
That's smart to do them out of order so that you can't really tell.
Yeah. So we sort of paired them by like, this is a very Dee Dee episode. This is a Philip episode. This is a fun adventure episode. This one's a quiet episode. So we paired aesthetically and, just to balance that out. And by doing that, we ended up breaking up the, seeing a show aesthetically change and evolve.
So how many years did it take you to create this whole show?
To the series, like the season 1?
Yeah.
10 months.
Okay, 10 months.
Yeah, it was. That was 10 months worth of production.
That's really fast.
It is really fast. We had 2 teams of board teams, again, doing 2 episodes at a time. A lesson I learned from Brian Sheasley, which I will always do in the future, don't do 2 episodes that start and end on the same day, offset them. So like I had 2 directors starting a new episode on the same day, and they would work on it for a couple of weeks, pass it off. So like I had 2 directors at the same level of stress the whole time.
Oh yeah.
And their team at the same level. So like if you offset it, if you need help from the other team, they could jump over and help because they haven't started a new episode yet, or they just finished an episode. So just offsetting them by like 2 weeks would have been enough.
Man, little tips like that you never would have thought of.
No, there's no way.
Come with experience, right?
Shay and I spent months beforehand just like, what is working with Rhonda, the producer, what is the structure of the board teams? How does it usually work? How much could we pay them? Because we were allowed to like pay base union rates in LA for people here as well as in LA. But that limits, we have this amount of, because everything's paid per week. You get director gets X amount of dollars per week. Storyboard artist gets X amount of dollars per week. That's how they line item and do the budget, right? So like if you have this amount for storyboards, that means I can hire 5 person per team. Like we talked about that for months. Just like how is this even going to happen and on the budget level, let alone creative? Because we're also like interviewing writers because Amazon has all the access to writers and voice people. And musicians and all that kind of stuff. So just constantly full steam ahead. And it was all this prep work. And then we would hire, like I hired my 2 board artists. And then next week we'd hire because they would work for 2 weeks. And then we needed to go to revision. So then I would hire my revisionist. So there's this tapering up and tapering down of hiring of the studio, which I, didn't think about either. But somehow, never worked really weekends. We came in on time and on budget.
That's amazing. That's a huge success in itself.
There's another definition of success.
So
here's a tip though: spend the money of the budget that you're given if someone wants to make a show. Because if you come in under budget, they're going to give you less money the next year. That's what I've heard.
That is a tip for any budget you get in any industry ever.
Right. So
spend the whole thing. Take your office out for lunch or something.
Yeah. So,
So Danger and Eggs got made. It was your baby for like 6 years before it got made. Does the magic wear off, or are you still raring to go to start a new one?
No, not immediately. Like right after the show was done, it definitely like I had to decompress for a while, like 6 months of like I'm not drawing anything, I'm not talking to anyone.
You become a hermit.
I did. I was like in the woods doing volunteer work.
Literally a hermit.
Yeah. Like I was doing masonry work in my basement, like I was teaching myself carpentry to build a door, like anything that wasn't animation, because my brain I'd been tapped out. Like I'd used everything, everything building up to Danger and Eggs career-wise. I had exhausted all those mental resources, and I couldn't regenerate quick enough. So like we went traveling. Wendy and I went traveling for a while, overseas for like a month, hiking and drinking whiskey in Scotland. It was, but eventually, the magic sort of came back of like wanting to create stuff, and Wendy and I are pitching and developing a bunch of stuff. But as far as like magic of Danger and Eggs as your own show, that has its peaks and valleys, but we still have fans. We still have people that talk about it. And that's amazing to me. That like,
so would you be okay with another season?
If it would happen, if it hasn't happened yet, I'm pretty doubtful that it's going to. Amazon's all constantly changing, but for it being the hardest thing, I would still do it in a heartbeat.
Yeah, nice.
because
Excellent.
that's the other thing Brian Sheasley taught me is like you learn your show Bible, like your production Bible, is season 1. You learn everything in season 1. There's no way you can make a really good production Bible, but there's no way you're going to know everything. So make a season, and then you'll have some idea what your show's about.
Nice. So now that you've successfully directed a show, you also have an Emmy. Congratulations also on that.
Thank you.
Does it get easier for you? Like, do opportunities come up more often when you're in a room with producers?
Yes.
Do they give you more credibility? Like, I guess what I'm asking is there a point where you don't have to struggle so much to get what you want, I guess?
Yeah, it's still a struggle and still a hustle, but it definitely changes the dynamic of like having a show. Having a show changes the dynamic. Winning an Emmy for the show, getting nominated for other things helps. It helps get meetings. It helps like people start knowing that, oh, you did this thing, and then
So like prior to the Emmy, were you trying to like get on people's phones and it was tough, and then afterwards they were like getting in touch with you type of thing?
It was. Yeah. I was able to like find people on LinkedIn and just like email them and through LinkedIn, and they would write me back like that day. I've had meetings. I had a meeting at.
Oh my gosh, Mike Owens is getting in touch with me.
Well, that's the thing is like that glimmer and shine is also short. That spotlight is going to go out eventually.
Yeah.
Quicker than you'd like it to. So you have to continue the hustle. Like I thought, made a show, got an Emmy. Any network will make anything I want from here on out.
Yeah.
Not the case at all.
The case.
I can get in the door. I can get a meeting at Netflix and Sony and Apple very easily, but it doesn't guarantee me anything.
So it's easier to get in the door, but is it still the exact same process to getting a show picked up as you experienced before then? Like finding something that works, or do they trust in you a little bit more? Like, oh, he has the intuition.
Yeah, there's definitely a little more trust as a relationship. There's like, you pulled off the impossible, and the weird, story of it being a Minnesota-based thing, and
right.
So there's enough lore behind it, I guess. But yeah, there's definitely some more trust in the room for you as a creator of a show at that point, and it's like Wendy and I went into pitch at Sony, and we accidentally had a meeting with Christine Belson, who's the president of Sony Animation.
Whoops, accidentally.
Yeah, like it was like we had come in for a second meeting with Karen Tolliver, and she's like, oh, we're having the meeting here. And I'm like, oh, this is a much nicer office. This is cool. This is in a conference room. We had a great meeting and no stress because I didn't know who we were talking to. But, I can still like send an email to Sony just to here's what we're working on. So but I have to constantly remind them of our existence.
Right.
So there's still like that sort of hustle and like, well, we're making stuff, we're pitching stuff. Like
So how do you do that? You just send an email saying, I exist, hi, bye?
I like this, no, that would be a terrible idea. No, I just send like Wendy and I are working on a film that we talk about when we go out and pitch. We talk about what we're doing as the studio. Like when we first went out and pitched, we hadn't formed our studio yet. And then 2 years later we're like, oh, we're coming to town for X reason. And we got WOMO started. We'd love to come by and talk some more. Say hi. Again, still very not asking for anything.
All right. And
there's the assumption that
I can fit you in for lunch or like.
Yeah. And there's the assumption I'll probably have a show to pitch, and then if it is just like coffee for 20 minutes, then I probably won't get too heavy into my pitch because I got to respect their time. But if if Netflix gives you an hour, then come prepared. But right. It's still just a conversation. So I can definitely. It's opened tons of doors, but I have to keep them open.
Gotcha. No, makes sense. I'm just thinking about for me, I'm kind of new on the scene. I've just made this career decision end of 2018. Uh-huh. So I'm putting stuff on my Instagram. I got the podcast going. I'm like, how can I make sure that people know that I'm producing stuff, and I'm going to be looking for work probably in a year or two when I graduate school. So
yeah.
Makes sense. Makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah. It's just, putting stuff work out there in the world. People see that you're doing more than just your school assignments. And then just, staying in touch and because people's, like I was saying with pitches, people seeing your development,
Right.
uh, it means that like you care about your craft and about what you're doing, that like you're going to do this whether anyone gives you permission or not. Kind of
Right.
attitude that we've been taking at WOMO is like, we're still making the stuff. It's just a matter of like, do you guys want to pick it up? And like, not as arrogant as like, if you want it, you can have it. But it's it's not such a begging scenario of like, oh, please make my show. Um,
Gotcha.
it's like, I understand this, things get made, things don't get made, but here's what we're working on. And then we talked to him again, like, oh, we did animation test. Here you go. And like, it just like getting to know the community in Minnesota or getting to know the community in Chicago, you just sort of, any opportunity to be in the industry, whatever that might mean, once you're sort of in the loop of things,
Yeah.
and you're able to keep your ear to the ground and sort of know what's coming next, and people help each other, like, oh, they're hiring storyboard artists over at Titmouse, you guys should, so everyone's helped each other out. It's a pretty cool community, actually.
Yeah, for sure. And like I feel like, well, you have to be pretty passionate about animation to already be in the industry in the first place.
Yeah,
So
it's a ridiculous thing to do.
one thing you mentioned beforehand, before we had this chat, actually, was the idea of persistence in failure and how that's
Mm.
kind of applied to your journey. And I know you wanted to talk a little bit about that, so maybe you can share how that's applied to your story.
Yeah, I feel like I've used the word failure a bunch already in this talk. So
Well,
it's,
now's a perfect.
hopefully it's apparent, but I think it's just the idea. So persistence and failure is like, I started doing this presentation on like the whole journey of Dangered Eggs. Like I did it at the MCAD here and a couple other places. Just going to schools and sort of like, what does it take to make a show? And I calling it persistence and failure, because that's kind of the name of the game. I really feel like failure is one of the best learning tools if you can bear it.
Yeah.
It can be tough if you're being creative and you sort of have open sensitivities to things. That's why you're creative. It's why you're storytellers and makers. So you're a little bit raw to begin with. So I get that failure sucks and like you put yourself out there and it's not good, but you don't know that until you put it out there. There's like, you got to make the thing to make the thing. Like, no one writes a script and it's awesome the first time. You have to do a terrible one. You have to do a bunch of awful drawings first before your drawings start getting good and it feels natural to you. I mean, there's various levels of skill, innate skill, however you want to put it, but it's still a work. It's still practice. It's still,
So what
you
do
got,
you hold on to while you're in the middle of that failure and you haven't seen that success yet?
mm,
Like you're still working on that thing and it's failing and you're improving and you're improving, but
yeah.
you don't see the light at the end of the tunnel.
It's a combination of walking away from things for a little bit,
Going to the woods with whiskey.
going to the woods with whiskey for a little bit, and I think it's small steps that are always moving forward. That's if I had to say like what I learned now versus back then, because there's a lot to chew and it was a whole brand new environment for me to exist in. But now I've learned if I just do a little bit, I'm further today than I was yesterday.
Yeah.
And it's that putting everything on one thing is exhausting.
Yeah.
Putting all of your hopes and dreams onto one thing. Like if I don't do this right, everything's going to fall apart. But like I need to do a terrible job. Like I did some terrible Flash animation before I got really good at Flash, just so that I can learn how to do it. I mean, like I had some terrible figure drawing until I realized I should really study figure drawing, and I still have to get better at that. But I'm pretty good at it. But
Don't you just wish you could be born with all the knowledge you have right now? Like,
maybe I'd be richer or something, or I have an amusement park or something. I don't know, man. Like I'm definitely a person that doesn't. Pretty have very few regrets about things. Like I feel like all the things are worth it in the end. But you have to be okay with failing at something, because if you don't at least try a thing, you've already failed. If you're gonna
yeah,
fail anyhow, at least on the end have like a stupid cartoon you can watch that you made, or like
exactly.
a drawing that even one drawing that you made. Just get to just a, you're always going to improve. You're always going to get better. You're never going to be the shiny thing. I the one of the cool advice I heard from, and even though I was lucky enough to meet Glenn Keane, but I did not get this advice in my personal conversation with Glenn Keane. I don't want that illusion to, like we had some wisdom quiet moment together. But he was giving a presentation, and he was saying that he used to always think that you're building your skill and your knowledge was just this steady incline. You just keep getting better and better and better and better. And he's Glenn Keane. I mean, he's like, one of the master people. And he's like, I have these moments where like, I don't think I can get any better. I don't think I can do any better. I think I've hit a rut. He learned that it's all about steps. It's like a plateau. Like I want to get into animation, and then like, ooh, I got that first job. And then you plateau for a while where like things don't improve. And then you hit a wall and you're like, God, I'm never going to get better. I'm not, you keep plugging away. And then suddenly something clicks and you're up to that next step. So this sort of step series of improvement and long plateaus of no changes and sort of like staying in that new area for a while till you've like have, I don't know if mastered it is the right word, but till you've, feel comfortable in that space. Because otherwise that next step doesn't appear if you're not at that level. If you're staying down here like those steps look terrifying, you're never going to know what's up on step number 7.
No, I totally like that illustration, and it totally makes sense. Yeah, when I think about it, it's like I've realized that I need to enjoy the process, even if it is failure, like whatever I'm doing. Otherwise, I'm
everything
burn out so fast.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that because like and process like. The end result can be very short-lived. Like, oh, that was great, and then you're like already like worried about the next
instant
thing.
moment.
It's a great moment. Like seeing an audience laugh at something that you created a year ago is definitely awesome, 100% awesome. But the trusting the process and enjoying the process, and that's what this idea of like those taking small steps towards the thing, like you want to get right to animating, but maybe spend some time in your sketchbook figuring out the scene for a while first.
Right.
Like it's not, you got to do the prep work. You got to do, get your reps in.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. Maybe to wrap it all up, you can talk a little bit more about WOMO, your studio, which
Sure.
you mentioned a little bit before. So why did you decide to go off and start your own studio when you were working, at another studio?
Well, I mean, by the time, Danger and Eggs came out, I was no longer working at Puny, honestly. Puny had things were getting tricky. They laid off a couple people, so I left. And like 2 months later, Danger and Eggs got picked up. So they rebuilt the Minnesota office just so we could do the pilot. So I was basically contracted onto my own show.
Oh, wow.
So I wasn't working anywhere when the show was over. I had no job. Fortunately, I had saved all the money from selling the show and being supervising director that I didn't have to work for 6 months, nice. Which never happens in anyone's life. So if you ever have that opportunity, take it. It's kind of, never thought I'd have that, but don't go too far in it. Anyhow, what's the question? You can't get me on track again. I lost the track again.
Well, your own studio. You started your own studio.
So it was this bug of creating original content. And then honestly, like Wendy and I wanted to be able to work together again. Wendy was still like working in media. She was doing animation, video editing, all this stuff for the Science Museum. But we had met each other on Animaniacs doing animation, and we have stories and things that we sort of developed together, some things we write together, but could never commit to doing any of those things because we had full-time jobs. So with sort of the momentum of Danger and Eggs and everything that's happened since then, I felt like I had a comfortable foot in making a go of a thing. And so us starting a studio allowed Wendy to leave a position and do this full-time together. Like we were starting the idea of a short film together, but couldn't commit the time that's necessary. So it was really about wanting to create original content, the idea of sort of being in charge of your own day-to-day destiny in life, and if I don't get the work, it's on me. But I also don't have to do work I don't want to do.
Right.
Like we're picking the stuff that we like to do, and not living in LA, so our cost of living in Minnesota is cheaper, so we can take bigger risks. Like I could have moved to LA, got, a $2,000 studio apartment by the off ramp if I wanted to, competing with CalArts students for the same jobs while I'm trying to pitch. Or I can trust that like I've got these contacts and this weird outlier story. Why not use that to my advantage and do the things that Wendy and I want to do? So where it's a balance, and we started the company we're still finishing the film, but it's been 2 years. Making a short film that we, based on one of Wendy's characters, my designs, and we wrote the story together. Because I've worked at so many small studios where that make your own thing was not an afterthought, but came after building the studio, where they got the space and the computers and all the employees, and you have to take on client work to pay your employees. And then like, oh, we should do a thing. We're like, let's just start. The worst case scenario, we have a finished film in 2 years, and then we'll go get full-time jobs somewhere else if we fail. But we've been busy for 2 years straight doing, character designs and storyboards for other shows, continuing to pitch and develop our own things. We're doing comic books. We're doing stuff for planetariums. So we have, or our sort of tagline for the company is storytelling by any media necessary.
Okay.
Because like we're using these skills of using media to tell stories, and like Wendy was doing interactive installation stuff at the museum while I'm doing a show, and now we're sort of combining those things and being storytellers in these other arenas. We've bid on jobs that are VR stories that we didn't get, but like we're like suddenly we're sort of this like because we don't have to support 300 employees. We sort of can come together as this like director package and balance our two strengths of what I'm good at or bad at, what Wendy's good at and bad at. It keeps us agile enough, but we can sort of join bigger projects, or we can initiate projects. Like we were helping develop an independent feature locally, and we did storyboard tests and some character designs and like all that pre-production stuff that's super fun. And then doing finished animation for our own projects, mentoring, teaching stuff, just like this community. This is where we are, so we're making our life in our career.
Probably building up more of the animation community where you are in Minnesota as well.
Yeah, like it's sort of make the most of where you are, because we've in this sort of arena, especially now that we're all quarantined, we're like remote. Yeah. And like we did a series in a remote sort of way, so like I have. So
you're used to this.
Yeah, I have that track record. Like it's not an impossibility. It's that little taste of like it could happen, because it just did happen. Gives you energy for whatever the next thing is.
I really like how you've kind of built your life around what you kind of want to do right now. That's awesome, and that's also pretty rare too. So
yeah, thanks. No, yeah. You sort of imagine, I'm going to be that animator in the weird Hawaiian shirt on the making of videos. That's making funny faces in the mirror. That's
classic. Oh my
yeah.
God.
So just sort of trusting like where it's not like complete free fall. It's like I'm they're motivated steps forward, but trusting like maybe it's this now. Maybe it's but at the heart of it, I'm still doing the thing I set out to do, which in and of itself is something to be happy about. Because you always that thing of like all like, what do you want to be when you grow up, kind of stuff. To actually do it is cool.
I feel like the lesson learned, or whatever, the biggest takeaway from me is just you kind of followed yourself, I guess, in a sense, over your journey. You weren't like, I want to work at one of the big studios and that's my dream. It was like, I want to, be an animator, and now it's like I want to be an animator on my own terms type of deal.
Yeah.
So
I mean, it definitely started out with like, want to work at the studio and like try to apply to those places. But when like the city I'm living in suddenly has an opportunity to work on a Warner Brothers show, and I get it, like then I don't need to do that. I don't need to, and you sort of, do I want to be in the sea of everyone trying to do the same thing, or in this place where there's a couple of us and opportunities are less? But I don't know. Just trusting what you want out of it, and like holding on to whatever you like about it, whatever is the thing.
Yeah.
You know, on some levels, it's because I don't know how to do anything else, and this is how I have to pay the bills. But on the same token, like there are worse ways to make money and pay the bills.
Well, that's for sure.
So it's if you can do it, it's tough. I mean, it's a tough thing to make a career in, I think, especially in the Midwest. But I feel like you can kind of invent your own path a little bit and play a little bit outside of the parameters. And I think it's getting more possible to exist outside of it's either this, LA or New York or nothing.
Oh, definitely. I have one last quick question for you. I know
Sure.
you're part of a nonprofit that does like animation mentorship. Can you just give like a brief overview
Sure.
on what
Yeah.
that is and if people can get involved with that?
Yeah, it's so it's called Nice Moves, and it's nicemoves.org is the site, and it's mainly for Midwest. It's Minnesota, the Dakotas, Wisconsin, Iowa, sort of surrounding states. But it is a community of animators, motion graphics, and visual effects people to sort of keep us connected, because everyone sort of is in these little pockets of things, not talking to each other. But you sort of need that community to help move you up and help you find out about jobs and help you learn that next skill and build the industry that's already kind of here, but not on the scale that we want it to be yet.
Yeah.
But it is focusing on community and education, getting people the retention. The MCAD's a great school for animation here, Minneapolis College of Art and Design, but people leave because there's no work for animation here. So
Yeah.
what can we do working through education and just having studio tours of the animations in town? The thing that I was doing, cold calling, can we provide that for people on a social level and get people to know each other? Like we just did an animation jam, a quarantine edition, where we just got everyone to here's a background, here's 10 seconds, and we're going to put this whole thing together, just to get people, talking and working and making stuff together. And then the other thing is the mentorship program we started a couple years ago, is whoever wants to be a mentor in locally, we'll have sort of like the speed dating sort of scenario where you just have a table and people come and tell you what they're into. They have a chance to research who you are, and they're like, I'm into this, I want to do that, I'm finishing my film in school. And all the people that want to do character animation came in my direction, and I'm taking them all on essentially.
Yeah.
But I'm doing sort of because I have this idea of mentorship and apprenticeship, and not necessarily having to go to art school if you can't afford it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, there's a
Is,
huge cost barrier to entry into animation
yeah,
for
and it doesn't
artists.
have to be, because there's so many parts that need to be played in animation, and if even if so, we like to work our way to being a nonprofit where we can have a brick and mortar place with computers and software licenses and help train people that might miss this opportunity. So community in a broad sense as well. And it's I've just been part of it I'm the vice president this year on the board. I've been a part of it for about a year, but we do presentations and we do After Effects user groups and Blender user groups and Toon Boom user groups, and just supporting each other, because once you leave school, you're sort of how do you fend for yourself? And it's not LA, but it could.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to be. It could be, but it could be Georgia. It could
Right.
be Atlanta. To the point where I go to legislative meetings with the head of Minnesota Film and TV to, I've employed people for an entire year, 16 people for a year doing animation versus working on a live action shoot for a month. So get some tax incentives.
Yeah.
And then with the connections that I have, I could probably get at least another storyboard team started.
Nice.
I'm very confident in that, but it's people are confident in that from the industry side, but until the state offers tax incentives, then no one's going to do it. That's why Atlanta succeeds, why Vancouver succeeds, why Toronto succeeds.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
It's why Canada is such an animation mecca, because they support it financially. So it is about like making the most out of where we're at, where it's led us, and being part of Nice Moves helps keep that going. This idea of hoarding your knowledge versus sharing it has always been really silly to me. And being that, like, if I was like, I want to be an animator, and someone's like, here's how I can help you, like, that would be the greatest thing in the world. So we're trying to be that.
I love that. Yeah, that's awesome.
And so, yeah, go ahead.
Cool. I was just gonna ask, is there anything else you'd like to share as we kind of wrap up the chat?
No, that's a lot of things. I'll say this because it'll make my dad really happy. It's this piece of advice that my dad had given me is to not. And he said this before I was 47, but he said, don't wake up when you're 40 and say you wish you would have.
Exactly. Yeah.
So like, I mean, he was like worked for the phone company and climbed telephone poles. Like, this is not his arena of stuff, but that idea of like, you don't want to look back and go, what have I done? So if something's driving you, just try it and do it. I was like, I don't know how much I can help you, but do it, do the thing.
Yeah.
I think that, living a life without regrets and just like, why not try it? And I understand there's a million other factors for everybody, but you don't want to wake up and say, I wish I would have gone into animation, because I'd probably be a much unhappier person.
I
was afraid.
agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, you're coming back to it, so and
that's kind of the thinking that I went through when I was like, what is my gravestone going to say? It's going to be like, Terry Ibo was like a pretty cool guy and just like did business his whole life, versus like Terry Ibo, like amazing animator who like did what he wanted and changed the world. And I was like, you know what, that second gravestone sounds a little bit better.
Yeah, it's worth finding out what you can do with that. And I think we've talked a lot about how animation being collaborative in general, and I'm learning as I get into this, like, whether animation is your thing or not, learning how to collaborate with people and create something in, like, I mean, the world's a crazy place, right? More than ever before, but like what it takes for people to sort of compromise and get together and do a thing, and then do something that like emotionally affects someone in a positive way in the long run. For that moment, made either my storyboard artist laugh or made that that kid and his dad watch Danger and Eggs and have a good time. It's pretty awesome.
It's the best thing.
It is. It honestly is. Like all of the madness and struggle that's in your head had some good effect. Even if it's like someone who's like, I could never get into animation, suddenly feels like, oh, maybe I can. Good enough for me.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that last piece of information.
Yeah.
I definitely am that type of thinking and sharing that stuff too. So,
Cool.
And just thank you for coming on the podcast in general. I'm really happy we got to chat.
Yeah, I appreciate you reaching out. This is fun to talk about. I could talk forever. So good luck editing.
I'll do a separate podcast of just you talking for every episode.
Just a live stream, just like, and you can just check in every once in a while. Mike's still talking.
Yeah. Cool. Well, if you're listening and you'd like to get in touch with Mike, you can do so by emailing him at mike@womostudio.com. And I'm going to include that link in the description of this podcast. And that's all for now. So thank you so much for listening. Okay, bye.